Happy Saturday. Welcome in. It's the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza. Alex Napoles back with me. Alex, you were calling high school soccer games last weekend.
Yeah, man. We're back. More specifically, I'm back, and I'm ready to jump into everything that's happened this week because it was a busy week for it being May, and none of our local teams are really kind of in the craziness of the height of their season, but we still have a lot to talk about, especially as far as the NBA goes.
Yeah, we've had a lot of local news as far as the Mammoth name change and Will Hardy getting his extension and a lot of stuff on that front. But as far as, actual business, wasn't a lot going around until the draft lottery on Monday. But before we jump into things, let's warm up a little bit, get you back into the flow of talk radio. How was your week, man?
Good week. Spent most of it just working and kind of doing something over here, doing something over there. It was a busy week and a long week, but overall I would say it was a good week. I don't necessarily have a highlight. I did a bunch of stuff, had to do a bunch of errands, and that's probably my highlight, just getting my life in order.
You got another busy week next week with more soccer coming up.
It's that time of year, dude. Soccer championships, high school championships, and this is probably the busiest. This upcoming week is probably the busiest week for KSL Sports as far as streaming all the high school championship stuff, man.
So remind me, who won last week was the 2A and 3A state championships. Who won those games?
Last week was 2A, 3A. Ogden took 3A, 2-1. They got a penalty there with 5 minutes left, so not the most exciting way to win a championship, but regardless, they won it. Congratulations to the Ogden Tigers, undefeated on the year. And then 2A, Mazer Prep ended up taking it, their first ever state championship.
Wow. Ogden, undefeated on the year. I didn't realize that. Wow. Go Ogden, go Mazer Prep. We'll see what's up this next week.
I'm excited, man. 5A, 4A, and 6A getting all kicked off this week, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Crazy. As far as my week, it's pretty low key. Sunday was Mother's Day. Monday it was my birthday technically.
Happy late birthday, man.
Thanks, man. And then we had the draft lottery on Monday night. And so that was kind of fun, with the craziness of the lottery. And so we'll start off there because that's obviously the biggest local news, right? And I think there were a lot of feelings Monday and Tuesday, and this is the funny thing about doing, a Saturday show, right? Because we don't get to talk in the immediate aftermath most of the time. We get a few days to sit here and let things settle and think about our feelings and stew about all the emotion. After the lottery happened on Monday night, I can show you. I have in my notes app. I have all these conspiracy theories written up.
Oh, you do? Wow.
Because, it's so fishy.
It is.
That the Mavericks end up with the number one pick.
Yes.
There are so many parts of this conspiracy theory that make sense. But at the end of the day, we knew the Jazz had a 48% chance going into it of picking number 5.
Right.
And yes, it sucks that that's who's picking number 1 and that's who's picking number 2. But this was all along the most likely outcome, right?
For the Jazz, yes.
Right, for the Jazz.
For the Jazz, yes. But it is annoying and it is, I guess, interesting. I don't know if that's the right word, but it is interesting to see the fact that it is the Dallas Mavericks picking first, and it is the fact that it is the Spurs picking first. And I think I told you this earlier in the week, Christian. If it was the Wizards, if it was the Hornets, right, one of those teams that had the 14% chance to get number 1, and they got number 1 and number 2, and the Jazz fell to 5, I think I would feel a lot better.
Everybody would feel a lot better.
But it is the fact that it is a play-in team who, yet again, wins the lottery.
Yeah.
For the second year in a row.
Right. It sucks. It's very frustrating, I would imagine, for Jazz fans that go through, the worst season in franchise history, the lowest win total ever for the Utah Jazz. And this is the reward that's the immediate feeling, right? But then you take a step back and you're like, it's still a top 5 pick in a really good draft. You're going to get a good player. And yeah, you're not going to get the franchise cornerstone in Cooper Flagg. You're not going to get the potential all-star in Dylan Harper. But you're going to get a shot at a player who, somebody like Con Knuppel, who has a really high floor, or somebody like VJ Edgecombe that has the potential still to be an all-star, just maybe not quite as safe of a pick. So it's just a lottery game, man. I do think it's interesting though that the 3 worst records are picking 4, 5, and 6.
That's right.
I think that's pretty funny.
That's right.
I do think that the lottery needs a little bit of reform because, as you mentioned, taking names away from everything, a play-in team winning the lottery, they had a chance to be in the playoffs.
Right.
And now they're picking number 1 overall. I don't think that's fair, especially to the truly bad teams, specifically like the Wizards, right? Like the Jazz were artificially bad. They lost games on purpose, including 2 games against the Wizards, right? The Wizards were just flat out bad. They didn't need to actively try and lose games. And so you look at their situation, and it's like, okay, if they bottom out every single year and they pick 4th, how do you ever expect them to get better?
Right.
So I do think the NBA could use some change to their lottery system, which they did change in 2019. They flattened out the odds and all that stuff. And, of course, the play-in tournament has added an extra wrinkle into that, right? Because a few years ago, the Mavericks wouldn't have been in the playoffs or the play-in.
Exactly. And that's something that I think needs to be looked at and adjust. That's the part that I think that they need to look at.
Maybe you just do a lottery of like the 10 worst records, right? Or maybe you do lottery in like tiers. Like you have the 5 worst teams are doing a lottery for number 1, and then the next tier of teams is doing a lottery for the 6th pick or whatever,
Right.
There are a ton of ideas out there.
You can keep the flattened odds. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Having the 3 worst teams and giving them an equal shot at number 1.
Yeah.
I think that's perfectly fine. But now, when did the play-in get added in? Was it 21? Was it 20?
I think
2020?
I want to say 21, yeah.
Whatever year it was, right? They haven't made any adjustments to adjust for that.
Right.
And that's why you see a team like the Atlanta Hawks last season who made the play-in were basically a fringe team that was a game away from winning and making it into the postseason, making it into the playoffs, right? That is what needs to be looked at, and that's what needs to be adjusted, in my opinion. You can't have a team that's borderline a playoff team winning the lottery, because then that just throws away the entire parity of the reason why we have the lottery in the first place.
Again, it makes it really tough for the bad teams to get better. This is the second year in a row, as you mentioned, second year in a row that a play-in team won the lottery. It's also the second year in a row that the worst record in the NBA falls as far as they can to pick 5. Last year it was the Detroit Pistons. They were one of the worst teams ever, and they fell to pick 5. And now they ended up having a stroke of luck. They were in the playoffs this year. Of course, they already have their star player in Cade Cunningham. So we'll see what the Jazz can do, but it's just, there's a lot that needs to be fixed. And you're right. They didn't change anything once they introduced the play-in tournament. And, of course, that was, let's say the play-in started in 21, right? They flattened the lottery odds in 2019, so maybe they saw that as too soon to make a change. They didn't want to make a change to the lottery immediately after that. I'm just assuming that. I don't know. But I think now there's been enough time and enough controversy, too, where the NBA needs to take a step back and see that it's a very flawed system.
Let me throw some numbers out here at you. The team with the worst record has not picked number 1 since 2019.
And they have not won the lottery since they flattened the odds.
And the team with the worst record has fallen to number 5 3 years in a row.
Oh, 3 in a row.
3 in a row. That includes the Jazz now.
Okay. Who was the one before Detroit?
Oh, I can't remember.
Okay.
Of the 28 top 4 picks handed out since 2019, more than half of those picks have gone to teams starting in the 5th slot or lower. So the top 4 picks since 2019 have been to teams that in the lottery standings, they were 5th or lower. And of those same 28 top 4 picks since 2019, 7 have gone to teams starting in the 8th slot or lower. You're getting teams that in the lottery standings, they're 8, 9, 10, whatever,
Yeah.
and they're making it up to the top 4.
Funny enough, the Jazz picked 9th and 10th previously, and they never moved up.
It's crazy. And yeah, there you go. That's another caveat in this whole bad luck Jazz
Right.
draft lottery situation that we've been talking about all week, is the fact that they've been in those spots where they've been in the 8th, 9th, 10th slots.
Yeah.
And they don't move up. They move down. In fact, they've moved down.
Yeah, so they're picking right there in the middle of the lottery. They see these other teams move up, and they're like, okay, you know what? Let's just bottom out. Let's give ourselves the best odds at picking with the number 1 pick. They do that, and then and they fall.
How unlucky of a franchise do you have to be to just continuously fall, man?
You had Adam Schefter, ESPN's NFL reporter, tweeting the day of the lottery about the Jazz and their lottery luck and the horrible luck that they've had. Like that was funny to me too, because what is the NFL reporter doing tweeting about the Utah Jazz?
I thought that was funny.
But regardless, again, it's frustrating. But this is what you got to do. This is what you got to prepare for. This is what they have been preparing for. Justin Zanuck said it in his media availability. I was thinking about playing it, but to be honest, and you were producing the lottery show, so you know, but like he had his media availability after.
It was so awkward, man.
It was so awkward. There was one person who asked a question. Nobody else asked a question.
Yeah.
And there was the same person did a follow-up question.
There was a good amount of people in that Zoom meeting too.
I think everybody was just distraught.
You felt it, man. You felt it. You felt it in this building.
Yeah.
The entire station was at JCW's doing this show. You felt it in the host. You felt it in the JCW. You heard the groan, man, in the background. It was so crazy. They were at JCW's. And, you know, you have them in queue, you're listening, we're watching this whole thing unfold.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember who came 6th or 7th or whatnot, but Ben was like, oh no.
Right. Ben was keeping track with the whole thing because as soon as you see it not going chalk, right, you see some of these teams falling in the 10th and 9th pick. Right. That's when you know, like, somebody's rising, and they're rising really high.
And that's what Ben Anderson did. He gave an audible and then the 5th envelope comes up. It's the Utah Jazz, and you hear the JCWs. Ah! And then from there, the wind out of everybody's sails is just gone. Justin Zanuck and that whole press conference, it was so awkward.
It was awkward, but essentially, you know, he was saying, yes, it's unfortunate, but like I said earlier in the show, this is what they were preparing for. This is the single outcome that was most likely. This was the most likely single outcome, right? 48% chance of this number 5 pick, and they're ready for it. And they may not know who they're going to select yet because the combine just ended. They're doing pro day stuff right now. There's still over a month to go until the draft. So they may not know exactly who they're going to pick, but they always knew that this was a possibility. And this is a very smart front office who has been through a lot. And I think that they have made some very smart moves in the past. And I really do trust that they're going to make the right move at 5. Whether that is for Trey Johnson or Con Knueppel or VJ Edgecombe or maybe Ace Bailey falls a little bit, whoever, they're going to get a crack at somebody. And remember this, whoever they draft at number 5 is going to be the best prospect that they've had in a very, very long time. They haven't picked at number 5 since the early 2010s, right?
I think
it was Dante Exum, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep. Dante Exum at number 3, I think was.
So, regardless, this is the best prospect as far as draft selection that they've had in a very long time. Better prospect than Cody Williams. Better prospect than Taylor Hendricks, right? Those guys are projects. They're getting somebody, ideally, who's not going to be a project, who has probably a higher floor than either of those two guys. But it makes you think, though, this was something that I saw come up throughout the week as well. After these results, after the Jazz see what happens, do you think that they just say, hey, let's go try and win some games next year?
That's a tough one.
Or do you think they bottom out again? Do you think that they say, no way this happens for the second year in a row, even though it happened to the Detroit Pistons twice?
It did. It didn't happen to the Pistons twice. And that's a difficult question to answer. And I think that of course, the people who make the decisions, Danny H, Justin Zanuck, etc., they're going to have a lot of decisions to make this offseason of what direction they're going to want to go this next season. Because if you look at next year's draft, the 2026 draft, the Jazz's pick, it can be conveyed to OKC if it's not top 8.
Top 8. All right. That's a tough decision.
So do you bottom out again to make sure you hold on to that pick, or do you put your fans first and start winning some games?
That's so tough because
you don't want to lose that pick.
It's the last year of it. If it doesn't convey to Oklahoma City next year, then it's over. They don't have to worry about that. This is a problem that they've had to worry about for like the last 3 years.
Exactly.
And that was such a bad trade. It's from the Derek Favors trade, sending him to Oklahoma City. Oh, right. That was such an awful move. But anyway, yeah. So that's a good point. You have to worry a little bit about the pick going over there to the Thunder, who of course they're playing in Game 7 tomorrow. We'll talk about the playoffs a little bit later. Best record in the West this year, one of the top teams in the NBA. So you don't want to send them even more ammunition. And then you look at the top of next year's draft, and there are 2 local connections to the Utah Jazz.
That's
Obviously,
right. That's right.
You've got AJ DeBonsa playing down there in Hurricane, one of the top prospects in the entire country. He was the number 1 rated prospect up until about a month ago. Now he's the number 2 prospect behind Darren Peterson, but he's still a very, very good player. We had draft analysts coming on the station throughout the year saying that if AJ DeBonsa was in this draft, he would go number 1 ahead of Cooper Flagg. So regardless, DeBonsa is an incredible prospect. And then you've got Cam Boozer, whose dad, Carlos, not only played for the Jazz, but he just joined the staff as a scout.
That's right.
So it really makes you wonder if you want to go conspiracy in tinfoil hat. Do you think that Adam Silver maybe told the Jazz, like, hey, sorry that you guys are falling to number 5, but let's just say I'll make it worth your while next year?
I don't know, man. First of all, I think when you're in a situation where you have the potential to lose that pick if it's not top 8, then you have to really consider losing games again next season. Yeah. Because you can't afford to lose that pick right now. Because you missed out on this. You missed out on a top 3 pick this season. You hold on to that. You make sure that you put yourself in a position to hold on to that pick, and maybe put yourself in a position to, again, maybe try to win another lottery next year.
So looking at the odds and stuff, if they finish with the 4th worst record and things went worst case scenario next year, that pick could fall to 8. So you don't want to fall anywhere. If that's your biggest worry, you don't want to finish better than the 4th worst record in the league, right?
Right.
So that's probably what you're looking at. And to be honest, for as good as this draft is, next year's draft is supposed to be better. Right. And let's say you do end up picking 5th again or whatever, or 4th. You're getting an even better prospect than you're getting this year. So I do think it would be in the Jazz's best interest to bottom out again. For all the pain that Jazz fans have had to go through over the last calendar year, 17 wins and then getting the gut punch in the lottery, buckle up because it's going to happen again.
Sorry, Jazz fans.
I think that's in their best interest, is tanking out again. Maybe you get some lottery luck and you finish number 1, or you move up and you're picking top 3. I mean, if you're picking between Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonsa, and Darren Peterson,
it's not bad.
All 3 of those guys are probable franchise cornerstones on the same level of prospect that Cooper Flagg is right now. So you're getting a really good pick next year, and I think that's the vision, right? Over the last 2 years, you've selected 6 youngsters in the first round. Some of these guys look like absolute role players, like in a good way. I mean that in a positive sense. Bryce Sensabaugh has a very clear, defined role. Cody Williams on the opposite end of the spectrum, still working things out, right? But then you've got Taylor Hendricks coming back. You've got Isaiah Collier, who really showed out. You've got Kyle Filipowski. Again, like you're stacking all these role players. You're filling out the rest of the roster. You just need the stars. And let's say at the number 5 pick this year, you get, maybe not the face of your franchise, but a really good number 2. And then next year you go get your guy. Next year you go get the cornerstone. That's the bow on top of everything and brings this whole roster together. Then after that, you can take the next step towards becoming a championship team. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. I think that is the most likely scenario, right? Unless something crazy happens, maybe this year maybe a trade opens up and they're able to take a huge swing. Who knows? But
it's going to happen.
What is?
As far as players becoming available, it's going to happen.
Right.
So the question is, are the Jazz willing to take a swing on somebody?
Yeah. Well, and then I haven't even gotten into what the Jazz are going to do with some of their veterans, right? Like Lauri Markkanen, like Colin Sexton, like John Collins. This was something I was talking about with Jake and Ben the other day because we know that San Antonio is interested in Giannis Antetokounmpo, right? And they have the number 2 pick. We also know a team like Houston is interested in Giannis. If the Thunder lose tomorrow, or if they lose in the Western Conference Finals, they're going to be desperate. Odds are they are going to be interested in Giannis as well. Nobody can beat the package that the Thunder are going to offer. They have the picks. They have the young players to trade.
Yep.
So, hypothetically, let's say the Thunder trade for Giannis, right? Let's say the Rockets trade for Kevin Durant. That means the Spurs are going to feel left out. That's when the Jazz knock on their door, or call up their phone and say, hey, you want Lauri Markkanen?
It's plausible.
I think it's probable.
Yeah.
I think that, again, Thunder, Rockets, Spurs, Giannis, Kevin Durant, Lowry. 3 teams, 3 players. I think that, and all 3 of those players, similar kind of, they're all huge 7-foot guys. They have different skill sets, of course, but I think that those are going to be the 3 biggest fish in the trade market pond this year. And whoever misses out on Giannis and Kevin Durant, I think is going to be interested in Lowry. So the Jazz might be able to get a pretty good package for marketing.
I would agree. And I think they have to answer the Lauri Markkanen question sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Because he's getting older. Right? He's not staying young forever.
He's losing value too.
Exactly. As you get older, as you continue to, find him on the injury reports, and
right.
The less and less he plays, the less and less value you can get out of Lauri Markkanen. So they have a big Lowry question they need to answer this offseason.
Yeah. And it's tough because, again, there is the flip side. What if, the lottery luck didn't crack the Jazz's way, but what if something else happens and they're able to, I don't know who it would be, right? I don't have these other scenarios laid out, but what if something happens and they're able to transform this roster overnight and then they can win with Lauri Markkanen? That's always a small possibility, right? But as far as what's most likely, yes, Lauri Markkanen is 28 years old. He does not fit the timeline with the rest of this roster, who most of them are like 21 and younger, right? So last year you had the opportunity to trade him to Golden State. They didn't want to meet the demands, and it was up to the Jazz to say no. Whether you want to say it was smart or not at that point, I thought it was a good move to say no because you don't have to sell your stars for less than what you're worth. But to your point, Alex, the more that Lauri Markkanen sits on the bench with a made-up back injury or a made-up knee soreness or whatever, his value goes lower and lower. So at what point do you say, yeah, we should have taken that offer from Golden State because now we're getting less than that?
Right.
So I think the longer that you wait, the worse that package is going to get. I think this is probably going to be, if you're going to move him, it's got to be this summer. You can't wait another year. Otherwise, if you hold on to Lowry, which is fine, he made an all-star team here, right? We know he can be a good player. But if you want to hold on to Lowry, then you got to make moves to start winning basketball games.
Right. Same thing can be said about the other veterans on the team, man.
Right.
You look at like a Colin Sexton.
John Collins.
You look at a John Collins. It's the same conversation, right? They have questions to answer this offseason about their veteran players because it's the same thing. How much value can they lose the more and more the Jazz are in a tanking rebuild youth movement situation?
Yeah, I mean, these guys are just rotting on the bench, losing trade value, and then on their end, it's frustrating because you want to be, especially a guy like Colin Sexton, like he's an absolute psycho in a great way. Like he wants to be out on the floor playing 48 minutes a night. I got to imagine it kills him to be sitting on the bench on the injury report.
Absolutely.
That's not fun. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jazz absolutely gut the roster and trade everybody over the age of 25 or whatever, right? So
you're going to roll out with Micah Potter every night?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you're still going to lose games if that's what the goal is.
Yeah.
If your goal is to chase Darren Peterson or AJ DeBonsa or Cam Boozer, losing games is in your best interest for another year. And it really, it's not fun. It's not fun to watch. It's not fun to cover. But as far as long-term success, it's what you got to do.
You can't lose that pick. That's where you're at. You can't convey that to OKC, and so it's gonna happen.
If
Decisions need to be made this offseason to make sure that you are in another situation next season where you're focusing on the youth movement.
It's almost like you have to be on one end of the spectrum or the other, right? You either have to be really bad, picking in the top 5 again, or you have to be, a play-in team or a playoff team where it's like, okay, we can take that next step right now.
Right.
If you're in the middle and you get bent in the lottery and then you convey that pick, that's absolute worst case scenario.
Yep. Because
you have nothing to show for it. You still have no direction. So again, I think it's probably safer to just lose the games. Lose the games, man. And I don't think that they want to do the artificial injury reports again. So that's what leads me to think that there are going to be a lot of big trades for the Jazz as far as veterans. But who knows? Maybe they keep on to Colin Sexton. I mean, he's young enough. I think he's 25. He's technically just hitting his prime, right? So maybe he's a player that they decide to keep. But he's a player that other teams could have interest in. Teams that struggled to score at times in the playoffs, like let's say the Rockets or the Orlando Magic want him, right? Or even Milwaukee. Like there could be, and especially with all the other moves that we expect to be coming this year, right? This summer. The Jazz aren't shy as far as being facilitators in trades.
No, they're not.
Danny Ainge likes to get his hands involved in everything.
I think people forget the Jazz helped out with that
the Luka trade.
Yeah.
They got a second-round pick.
I think people forget about
shakers.
that, too.
The Jazz were part of history.
Yeah, dude. That's what you want, man. You want to be tied to something crazy like that. I mean, no one at this point remembers the Jazz were a part of it, but hey, we remember. We remember the Jazz were a part of Luka Doncic, okay?
All right. I did not notice we were so far over. So we'll take a break. Coming up next, we'll talk some more basketball. We'll get into some playoffs later on in the show. It's the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome back to the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napoles with me. We're talking Jazz rebuild after the lottery fun last week. Alex, you proposed? You asked me an interesting question in the break, and this is what we're going to roll with this segment. So go ahead and fire away. I'm going to put a poll up on Twitter, actually, because I think it's so interesting.
So we talked about the pick next season, right? And how if it's anything but a top 8 pick, it will be conveyed to the OKC. So obviously next season there's going to be a little bit extra incentive to start tanking a little bit more. But when does it stop? When does this end? How long? You can't perpetually be in a rebuild forever, right?
I hope not.
Because if it doesn't happen again next season, right, in that 2026 NBA draft lottery, you don't end up winning. The balls don't end up going your way. So then you say, "Oh, well, let's try again next year." Oh, dang it, we missed out again.
Right, because that's what we talked about last segment,
Let's
right?
try again next year. So how you can't perpetually be a tanking, losing team forever. So how long can you continue a rebuild? How long can the organization continue to focus on trying to gamble on winning this lottery? And two, how long can the fan continue to support a team who's made to lose?
I want to look at the Charlotte Hornets record by year because they jump to the top of my mind as far as rebuilding forever.
What a waste of LaMelo Ball's prime, man.
Yeah, I guess if you want to look at it that way, I think he's just fine all the way across the country doing his thing.
He's getting paid. He doesn't care.
Let's see. The last time they won more than 40 games. So they won 43 games in 21-22.
Right.
That was the year after they drafted LaMelo Ball. But since then, 27 wins, 21 wins, 19 wins. So I don't know. I guess that's not as long as I thought. But the year before, they only won 33 and then 23, right? So they haven't been good in a long time. They've maxed out at 43 wins. The last time they won more than 43 games, 2015-16, they won 48 games. And that was the last time they made the playoffs. They lost in the first round. So if you want to just go as far as making the playoffs, the Hornets have been in a quote-unquote rebuild for 10 years.
Ooh. It's a really long time.
That is a really long time. The interesting part about that question is because you look at the Jazz, right? They picked Taylor Hendricks at number 10 and Cody Williams at 9. And those years, I think they fell one spot total. So it's like, were those first 2 years, were they really rebuilds or were they just... that's an area that I've seen a lot of contention from Jazz fans as far as they should have lost more games those years, especially during the Wemby draft, right? Everybody knows that. But those years you were kind of in the middle. So do you count those towards the rebuild, or like is this technically the first year of the rebuild where you truly bottom out, or is it just not making the playoffs?
No, I think if we're putting a timeline on it and we have to say, oh, this is when it began. To me, I think it began the second you trade away Rudy and Donovan.
So that's when you would say the rebuild started.
That's when the rebuild started.
Traded away your stars. You still had Mike Conley for a little bit. You had him for a season and a half, or was it just half a season? I'm losing
it. Might have been half a season.
It might have just been half a season.
The timelines
right?
get all jumbled up at this point.
But that's hard because that first half of the season, remember opening night, Will Hardy's first game, they beat the Denver Nuggets.
Right.
And it was like, oh my gosh.
And they went on this 10,
they started off
10-0.
Right.
10-0.
So it was like, really that first season, that's what's hard about this, is the Jazz probably could have made the playoffs that year. But then at the trade deadline, they traded away Malik Beasley. They traded away Jared Vanderbilt.
Right.
And I think Mike Conley as well. So is that when the rebuild truly started?
I think at that point, and maybe I'm completely not hitting the nail on the head here, but I think at that point they were still trying to figure out the full direction of which they wanted to go.
Right, that's why I'm unsure.
Right. And you look at that roster, and I mean, Jared Vanderbilt's not a bad dude, not a bad player. Beasley was over here knocking down threes like crazy.
Yeah.
Clarkson was still, bringing you sparks, and you saw Conley, and I'm trying to think who else was on that roster, but I mean, it wasn't, per se a terrible, bad
That was
roster.
Walker Kessler's rookie year,
right,
and he was a true standout.
He got traded in that Rudy trade. He was part of that Rudy trade.
Yeah.
After drafted by the Timberwolves. And so it's a tough one, but I do still think that it began when you lost your superstars. When you trade away Rudy, when you trade away Donovan, that's when the rebuild began for me.
Okay.
Even though that first season it may have seemed like there still wasn't 100% true idea of which way they wanted to go.
Yeah.
They still weren't ready to completely bottom out, but I think that's when it started.
Okay, so this is the poll I'm putting up on Twitter. I'm putting it on the @KSL Sports Zone Twitter account. You can also chime in. I'm at C Esparza Sports or at Napoles Alex, right? So I'm asking question on the Saturday show. Jazz fans, how much longer can you handle a rebuild? I can't anymore. 1 more year, 2 more years, or as long as it takes.
That's a good one. I'm curious to see the results because I think that's been a big topic of conversation throughout all the shows on the station throughout the week, and just focusing on how much longer can people stomach a rebuild.
Yeah. Because losing is not something that Jazz fans are used to.
No.
They are, I mean, probably not anymore, right, because of the last 3 years. But, you know, a lot of people used to point at the fact that Jazz had like the winningest, they were the winningest franchise like in NBA history, right? They had like the highest regular season win percentage for the longest time.
Right.
And there were not these long droughts of not making the playoffs. I don't even know the last time they missed the playoffs 3 years in a row. It's crazy. And it's funny because on the other hand, like, yes, they've never won the championship. They've never won the ultimate goal, but they've had so much regular season success where it felt like they were always kind of there. They had the John Stockton and Karl Malone years. They reached the conference finals with Darren Williams and Carlos Boozer and Andrei Kirilenko. They felt like they were there. With Rudy and Donovan, it felt like they were right there, even though they never got out of the second round, right? So it's always felt like they were so close. 3 losing seasons in a row, 3 years of not making the playoffs is foreign.
That 2020 season, was it, when they were the number 1 team in the NBA? Had the best record in both the East and the West?
2020, 2021, because it was the shortened season.
That year, man, that should have been, they were meant for more. They were made for more. And they just couldn't get past Trey Mann.
So it's been 10 years since the Jazz missed the playoffs for 3 years in a row. From 2012 to 2016, so they missed 4 years in a row, technically. And yeah, that's right before, you know, Gordon Hayward got his peak. I can't remember what year they drafted him, but that would have been, you know, the start of Gordon Hayward. And those teams were not very good. But yeah, since then, you know, as you're mentioning, at one point they were the best team in the NBA.
So again, how do you put yourself in a position to get back to that?
Do you have an answer, or are you just leaving it open-ended for listeners? Wow, we already have 14 votes. I posted it right after I asked it to you.
Nice. Yes, everybody, Twitter, go vote. If you're listening, go take a vote. And it's more of an open-ended question because it just kind of goes back and ties into what we were just talking about, right? How much longer does this rebuild go on? How much longer can you rely on just your luck at the lottery?
Right.
You can't continue to gamble away your luck.
I think the other part, like the question is going to answer itself because you look at, again, 6 players drafted in the first round over the last 2 years. Those players are going to need second contracts eventually, right? So yeah, you can't keep these guys around, whether you trade them away or just decide to let them walk in free agency.
Yeah.
You definitely don't want to start losing these players without having a direction. So I think that question is going to need to be answered before then. So really, like, you're probably looking at, based on that timeline, it feels like 2025-26 is going to be the last season where the Jazz truly bottom out. And hopefully, for their sake, things crack their way in the lottery. And maybe they're able to sign somebody else in free agency or get some other young players as far as in trades, trading away your vets, right? And getting some of these other guys with a lot of potential.
Right.
It feels like 2025-26 ideally will be the last year of the rebuild. And then as far as timelines go with contracts and everything, that's when you can start taking the next steps and really, really shaping your roster and seeing it take form. But bad luck is a thing, as we know.
For the Jazz, yes.
For the Jazz specifically, bad luck is a thing. Maybe you get to the end of next season, you fall to 5 in the lottery again, you still don't know what you have in Keontae George and Cody Williams and all these guys. Bryce Sensabaugh, maybe his ceiling looks like a role player, a bench player at max. Like Isaiah Collier doesn't improve. That's worst case scenario. And then you're like, okay, we've got to restart the rebuild at that point. That's absolute worst case scenario. But I will say, knock on wood, I don't think that's going to happen. I like what we saw from Kyle Filipowski. I like what we saw from Isaiah Collier. I think Taylor Hendricks is going to be a big surprise when he finally takes the floor. Jury's still out on Cody Williams. But he has the potential. The potential is there. He's just got to put on some muscle. Keontae George, I don't know. That's the player I'm hung up on.
He left a lot to be desired this season.
Yeah.
Especially coming in. Right. I don't like to make the comparison to Isaiah Collier, but I mean, Isaiah Collier came in, broke the record for assists for a rookie.
Right.
And you visibly see his ceiling. For Keontae, I thought we would get more of that this season from Keontae, but he left a lot to be desired.
He didn't seem to really improve much from his rookie year. There's a
Right.
lot of shooting, a lot of volume, and sometimes the numbers were there as far as points and assists and stuff, but it never felt like there was any substance to it.
Or really consistency to it.
Shout out to my guy, Nate Reisner. He works in the building. He's listening. He said 1 more year.
1 more year?
Yeah. I think that would be like 25, 26, right?
And look, man.
Go get DeBonsa, go get, whoever.
Right. And I think the optimist in me looks at number 5 and says, you can still get a really, really good player at number 5. And what if, the scouting department and everything works out in the way of the Jazz, and you potentially get a superstar that nobody was looking at.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of really, really good talent at the top of the draft this season.
Yeah.
Can you get that out of, if Ace Bailey falls that far, can you get that out of an Ace Bailey? If VJ Edgecombe falls that far, can you get that out of an Edgecombe? Right?
Yeah.
It's the optimism in me still looks at number 5 and says, look, this is a really good pick, and you have the potential there to have a really good player who can eventually develop into a star.
Yeah, I think, again, the immediate fallout after the lottery, it was like, oh, that really sucks that the Jazz fell all the way to 5. But I think you're putting it in a very positive perspective. Like, it's a good draft. It's not last year's draft. Last year's draft was horrible. You're not the Pistons, who had the worst losing streak in NBA history, and then all they have to show for it is Ron Holland II. Yeah. The Jazz are going to get a good prospect out of this. And again, ultimately, it's not who you were hoping for, but you only had a 14% chance at Cooper Flagg anyways. So we'll see what things look like down the road. But I do think that is an interesting response because, again, losing is not something that Jazz fans are used to. Early results from the poll, we've got 30 votes so far. I Can't Anymore and 1 More Year are tied with 36% of the votes each. 10% of the votes are saying 2 more years. 16% of the votes are saying as long as it takes.
That's actually a little bit more than I thought.
That's more than I thought as well.
We'll see. We'll revisit this at the final segment and
see how the numbers are doing.
And see what the numbers are doing. And we'll talk about it. But I am curious to see everybody's reaction and see how long people can take this rebuild.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll get to that later in the show. Coming up next, though, we'll hit technical fouls. Kevin Durant letting the Twitter fingers fly. You always love it. And then later at 11:05, we'll talk NBA playoffs because it's been a fun week. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
If you're coming from the street with dirty shoes on your feet, that's a tactical technical foul. If you switch the radio to some modern music show, that's a technical foul. If you touch the thermostat,
You'll get hit with a bat.
'cause that's a technical foul.
You will feel my wrath.
That's a technical foul.
Personal foul, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
A technical foul.
It's the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napoles with me. It's time for Technical Fouls, one of our favorite segments. Every week we get to talk about some of the funnier things that happen in sports. We'll start off the first technical foul. Alex, I'll let you introduce it. I want to give some background though. So the the NFL did their schedule releases this week. And a couple years ago is when the schedule release really became a thing because the social media teams make a big event out of it. Each social media team for every franchise, they do their own video of a fun or creative way of announcing the schedule. And I used to really enjoy them because they were fun, they were creative. This year, though, I didn't have any fun with the schedule release because like the week leading up to the actual release, they came out on Wednesday, but we had all of the international games come out.
Right.
All of the prime time games come out,
Right.
and then several other random people like leaked the schedules.
Right.
So we knew everything essentially before the schedule release videos came out, but there were some good ones. And I'll let you start us off with our first technical foul.
Before we get into the technical foul, I do think it's lame that the NFL decided to make like an actual TV show to release all the schedules this year.
Right. Yeah.
Especially considering the fact that we already knew half the schedule.
Again.
You're going to make like this hour-long show or however long it was to drop all the team schedules, but like, I mean, we already knew. You don't have to just release schedules. You don't have to make a pageantry out of it. You don't have to make a show out of it. But that's my 2 cents.
No, I agree.
Tyreek Hill. Oh, I guess the Indianapolis Colts gets the technical foul.
Okay.
So, again, as you were mentioning, people love the creativity. People love to put out these fun videos to show the schedule releases. And I believe the Colts are playing the Miami Dolphins week 1 of the season. And so in their schedule release video, the Indianapolis Colts, well, first of all, they made it like Minecraft theme.
Yeah.
So it was that in that sense, it was cool. But for the Colts, they introduced the Dolphins with a dolphin wearing a Tyreek Hill jersey, swimming in the water. And then the Coast Guard came up and arrested the dolphin. A little tone deaf, if you think about it, considering what happened to Tyreek last season.
If you don't remember, Tyreek Hill was put in handcuffs and put on the ground on his way to one of the Dolphins games last year because he was speeding. He was pulled over and he was put in handcuffs. And that was a big deal, right? So, yeah, the Colts were making fun of that.
It's a little tone deaf. And so the Colts had to come backpedal. They deleted the video and had to apologize not only because Tyreek Hill, or not only because of the whole Tyreek Hill situation, but because they also didn't ask Microsoft permission to use the Minecraft theme.
Oh, they didn't?
They did not. So they had to issue an apology to Microsoft, and they had to issue an apology to Tyreek Hill. The funny part about it, too, Tyreek Hill then goes on social media, tweets this statement, tweets like the video.
Yeah.
And he's like, you know what? This is actually pretty funny.
Yeah, he said they should have left it up.
He didn't care. He was like, this is pretty funny. And that's the way you should react to something
because he made light of the situation anyway.
Exactly.
Because he did the touchdown celebration where he put his hands behind his back.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Really controversial, right? But it just shows, he never really cared that much, which that's a whole separate conversation. But yeah, he didn't care that the Colts did this. It was funny. The Chargers also did a Minecraft theme schedule release video.
Oh, did they?
The Jets claimed that they did one, and then they ended up doing something else. I can't tell if they were serious and they just didn't want to be the third team doing a Minecraft video, or if they were making fun of the two other teams that did do Minecraft.
Well, it's funny because the Chargers, a little bit after this whole apology came up, they put out a similar disclaimer indicating that they did have permission from Microsoft to use Minecraft. But the Colts didn't.
I also, while we're on the topic of schedule releases, and I don't know if anybody really cares about this, I thought the Bills one was really funny. It showed like the GM or whoever just asking Josh Allen. He's like, hey, what should we do for the schedule release? And Josh Allen's like, I don't know, just use AI or something. And then the general manager's like, oh, AI, okay. And then it cuts to Allen Iverson because, everybody's using AI for these crazy videos. But
I'm gonna be honest, man. I didn't pay attention enough to see all of them.
no,
Because I'm
there's a
not
lot.
going through 32 teams and watching all these videos. But
Yeah.
I mean, I do enjoy the creativity. I do enjoy the creative process of bringing these to life and making these things happen. But
It's the Super Bowl for the social media
oh
teams.
yeah, 100%. But I'm not gonna go through and watch every single one. If it pops up on my feed, great, I'll watch it. But I'm not gonna seek them out.
I agree.
So I did not see the Bills one, unfortunately. But I did see the Falcons one. And they did have... So a couple months ago, Bill Belichick decides... And his girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, decide to wear a 28-3 jersey or whatever the score was.
Yeah.
Mocking the Falcons. And so the Falcons mocked Bill Belichick back in their schedule release video.
I didn't see that.
And it was Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson in like 8-bit animation.
Uh-huh.
And Bill Belichick was like, we're not talking about that. And in the background, and I thought that was funny.
That's clever. And yeah, that's what's funny is these social media teams, they just take shots at everybody. And
That's the best
it's all
part about
tongue in cheek. It's lighthearted.
It's the
Who
best
cares,
part
right?
about it, man. It's the best part about it.
I want to get to my technical foul. Kevin Durant, pretty notorious for having some very active Twitter fingers, right? He likes to get after everybody, random people, analysts, whoever. I thought this was really funny, though. Emmanuel Acho, everybody's favorite NFL analyst, joking, obviously. Nobody likes him. He said the Celtics match up better against... He's a former football player,
That's
by
right.
the way, right?
Yes.
He said the Celtics match up better against the Knicks without Jason Tatum than they do with him. Give me 2 minutes to show you something you may have missed, and I'll convince you exactly why. And then he posted this, 2-minute long clip. Kevin Durant replied... So it has nothing to do with Kevin Durant. That's part of what makes this funny. He replied, he said, hot take artists have ruined the sport. Football guys, no disrespect, but you guys need to stay in your lanes. You don't know what it's like in between these lines, man. Give it a break. Dudes who have quit football early to pursue media talking about mental toughness. Cut it out.
I think the worst part about all that is stay in your lane. You ever been told to stay in your lane, Christian?
Yeah, a few times.
It's not a good feeling, man.
No.
It cuts deep for some reason.
I just think it's funny because, again, nobody likes Acho.
That's true.
But a lot of people don't like Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I think I'm on KD's side on this one, man.
Yeah, and I don't want to tell analysts, he's on Emmanuel Acho's on a sports talk show, right?
Right.
So you can't expect him to stick to just one subject. But again, hot take artist, I think, is a very real thing in sports talk everywhere, especially nationally. You look at a lot of the biggest names, like they get there because of being hot take guys. And Emmanuel Acho is definitely one of them. Just putting things out there, putting crazy statements out. The Celtics match up better against the Knicks without Jason Tatum. That's a crazy take.
That is a crazy take.
You're telling me the Celtics match up better against the Knicks without their best player?
No.
Okay.
And
Right.
we'll get to it here next segment.
We'll talk more playoffs next segment,
But
right?
last night kind of showed it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. But still, hot take artists, again, I think, it's clickbait, it's rage bait. Especially Emmanuel Acho got popular for the whole Justin Herbert is a social media quarterback sort of thing. I do think that is ruining sports talk radio because you hear analyst and the first part of your brain wants to think of Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith, Emmanuel Acho, Kendrick Perkins, like these guys that just say these crazy things to get interaction.
Exactly.
But yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I appreciate Kevin Durant, calling this guy out.
Right, and that's why I say I'm on KD's side on this one because I mean, when you think of Acho, you do think of someone who's kind of there to just push a little bit, push a little bit of clicks towards the shows.
Yeah. It is what it is. That's the world we live in.
Yeah, man.
But the bottom line is Emmanuel Acho was never a very good football player.
Clout chasing. That's what it's about these days.
That is funny. He did say something about you don't know what it's like to tackle. He said this to a random fan. You don't know what it's like to tackle Adrian Peterson in the open field. And somebody replied and they said you only played Adrian Peterson once in your career. He had like 150 rushing yards and you didn't record a single stat in the game either. So you don't know what it's like either.
That's hilarious.
I enjoyed these guys getting put in their place on social media.
I
think
love
it's
when
funny.
people come in and fact check people like that, man.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
because they're ridiculous.
Oh
So.
yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. Let's take a break. Next segment, we'll get into NBA playoffs. Big game last night, even bigger game tomorrow. It's going to be a fun conference finals week, so we'll talk that next. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5 DKSL Sports Zone.